Welcome back to a brand new video on Neurophilus. You're about to experience a powerful story, one that pulls you in, keeps you thinking, and stays with you long after it ends. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're exactly where you should be. Before we begin, hit the like button, subscribe for more thought-provoking stories, and tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? Let's begin. The way we were taught about happiness. Let's be honest. There are days when getting out of bed feels like dragging your soul through wet cement. Your body moves, but something inside you resists every step. You look around your room, your life, your routines, and none of it feels solid. Everything feels heavy, muted, off. The smiles you see around you don't feel real. They look practiced, like masks people learn to wear so no one asks uncomfortable questions. The routines that once gave structure now feel pointless. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. And somewhere in the quiet moments, maybe while staring at the ceiling, maybe while scrolling endlessly, you hear the question you try not to ask out loud. Why am I even doing this? What's the point of all this suffering? If that question has ever crossed your mind, you're not weak. You're not broken. You're paying attention. Because here's the truth most people avoid. Life is suffering, not in a dramatic poetic sense, not as a metaphor. In the raw, unavoidable reality of being human, pain is not the exception, it's the rule. Loss, disappointment, fear, boredom, anxiety, grief. These are not glitches in the system. They are the system. And yet the world you grew up in told you something very different. You were conditioned to believe that happiness is the goal, that life is supposed to feel good most of the time, that if you're not smiling, something must be wrong with you. That discomfort is a problem to be solved, a phase to escape, a flaw to medicate away. You were taught to chase pleasure, comfort, and ease, and to panic the moment they disappear. So when suffering shows up, as it always does, you assume you failed. You think, other people seem fine. Why can't I get it together? And instead of questioning the story you were sold, you turn the blame inward. That belief quietly poisons everything. Because when you expect life to be painless, pain feels unbearable. When you believe happiness is the destination, suffering feels like a detour that shouldn't exist. And the more you resist discomfort, the heavier it becomes. You don't just feel pain, you feel wrong for feeling it. But what if the problem isn't your suffering at all? What if the problem is the lie that told you suffering shouldn't be there? No one prepares you for this. No one tells you that pain is part of the human contract. No one teaches you how to stand inside it without losing yourself. Instead, you're handed distractions, entertainment, endless noise, temporary relief. And when none of it works for long, you're left alone with a quiet, terrifying thought. If this is life, I don't know how much longer I can do this. That's not a personal failure. That's a cultural one. We live in a world obsessed with appearances, speed, and surface-level comfort. A world that rewards numbness and punishes depth. A world that teaches you to avoid pain at all costs, but never explains what to do when avoidance stops working. And it always stops working, because suffering isn't asking to be eliminated. It's asking to be understood. Until you face that, no amount of motivation will help. No positive quote will fix it. No distraction will last. You'll keep running in circles, exhausted, wondering why nothing fills the emptiness. This is where the real journey begins, not with escaping suffering, but with questioning the story you were told about it. Because once you stop asking, why does my life hurt? And start asking, what if pain isn't the enemy? Everything starts to shift, and that question leads us somewhere most people are afraid to go. Straight into the heart of meaning itself. The discovery made in the darkest place. Viktor Frankl did not come to his ideas from comfort, theory, or distance. He didn't sit safely in a room and speculate about human strength. He was thrown into the darkest conditions imaginable and forced to confront what keeps a person alive when everything is taken away. He was imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. He lost his parents, his brother, his pregnant wife. He was starved, beaten, stripped of his identity, reduced to a number. Every external reason to hope was erased. And yet inside that hell, Frankl made an observation that would change how we understand suffering forever. He noticed something disturbing. Two men could be placed in the exact same conditions. Same brutal labor, same hunger, same cold, same constant threat of death. And yet their outcomes were completely different. One would collapse within days, eyes empty, body failing, spirit gone. The other would endure, sometimes quietly, sometimes with compassion, sometimes even helping others survive. This wasn't luck, it wasn't physical strength, and it wasn't positive thinking. Frankl realized the difference wasn't in the body at all. It was in something invisible, something internal, something most psychology at the time barely acknowledged. Meaning. Those who survived longest were not the toughest or the most optimistic. They were the ones who still believed their life was asking something of them. A reason to keep going, a responsibility not yet fulfilled, someone they still needed to live for. When that inner reason disappeared, the body soon followed. Frankl watched prisoners who lost their sense of purpose deteriorate rapidly. Their posture changed. Their eyes dulled. Illness took hold. Death followed soon after. Their spirit had already surrendered before their body did. And this is where Frankl reached a conclusion that shattered the dominant ideas of his era. Sigmund Freud believed humans were driven primarily by pleasure. Alfred Adler believed we were driven by power. Frankl saw something deeper than both. He saw that human beings are driven by the will to meaning. Strip away pleasure, strip away power, strip away comfort, status, freedom, even dignity. And if a person still believes their suffering has meaning, they can endure what should be impossible. But take away meaning, even in a life of comfort, and everything becomes unbearable. This is why some people living in luxury still feel empty, depressed, and lost, and why others, surrounded by pain and deprivation, can continue with unshakable inner strength. It's not about what you have, it's about what your suffering means. Frankl didn't romanticize pain. He didn't glorify suffering. He simply told the truth. Suffering is unavoidable, but despair is not. Despair appears when suffering feels pointless. Inside the camps, Frankl saw men cling to small but powerful reasons to live. A child they hoped to see again. A manuscript they still wanted to finish. A belief that their suffering could become a form of sacrifice rather than pure loss. These reasons didn't remove the pain, but they made it survivable. One quote followed Frankl everywhere, not as theory, but as lived reality. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. That why didn't need to be grand. It didn't need to save the world. It only needed to be real. And this is where his insight reaches directly into your life. You may not be behind barbed wire, but you may still feel imprisoned by burnout, depression, numbness, or a sense that your days are blending into one another. You wake up and ask, why bother? And without an answer, everything feels heavier than it should. Frankl's message is not comforting in the usual way. He doesn't promise relief. He doesn't offer escape. What he offers is something more durable. You do not need to eliminate your suffering to survive it. You need to discover what it is for. And that discovery, quiet, personal, and often painful, is what separates those who collapse from those who endure. In the next chapter, we'll explore the first concrete path Frankl identified for finding that meaning, creation and contribution, because sometimes the very pain you're carrying is the raw material for something only you can bring into the world. Creating meaning through what you give. There is a kind of suffering that doesn't just hurt, it hollows you out. It leaves you feeling useless, disconnected, as if nothing you do actually matters. Viktor Frankl believed that one of the most powerful ways to confront this kind of pain is not by looking inward, but by turning outward, toward creation and contribution. When most people hear the word work, they think of jobs, salaries, and survival. But that's not what Frankl meant. He was pointing to something deeper. Work, in his sense, meant giving something to the world that only you can give. It meant taking responsibility for a task, a calling, or a form of service that makes your existence necessary. Even in the concentration camps, Frankl saw this truth unfold. In conditions designed to erase humanity, some prisoners still chose to give. Doctors treated the sick with no medicine. Men shared their last piece of bread. Teachers whispered poetry, stories, and fragments of memory to help others stay sane. They weren't surviving comfortably. They were surviving meaningfully. What kept them alive wasn't hope for pleasure or comfort. It was the knowledge that their presence still mattered to someone else. This is the part modern life often gets wrong. You are taught to see work as a transaction, time for money, effort for reward, value measured in income, status, or applause. And when your job feels empty, or when recognition never comes, you begin to feel empty too. You assume the problem is you, but Frankl would say this: your job does not define your meaning. Your contribution does. Ask yourself a simple but unsettling question. What would I still do if no one paid me? If no one noticed? That question cuts past ambition and ego. It reveals what you care about beneath the noise. Somewhere under your exhaustion, anxiety, and numbness, there is still a quiet pull towards something that matters. A desire to help, build, teach, protect, heal, or create. The problem is not that you lack purpose. The problem is that modern life drowns it out. Constant distraction, endless comparison, chasing validation instead of responsibility. We are trained to avoid discomfort at all costs, yet meaningful contribution almost always involves suffering. It requires effort, risk, sacrifice. And because of that, many people retreat into comfort and wonder why life feels meaningless. Frankl argued that even when your external situation is unbearable, you still retain one essential freedom: the freedom to choose what you give. No one can take that from you. Meaning is not something you invent in your head. It's something you discover through action, through showing up, through offering your time, attention, and care to something beyond your own comfort. You don't need to change the world. You don't need a grand mission. Start small. Write a page. Help one person. Build something imperfect. Speak when silence would be easier. Create even when fear tells you it won't matter. Especially then. Because here's the shift that changes everything. When you stop asking, how can I avoid suffering? And start asking, what am I willing to suffer for? Pain stops being meaningless. It becomes a cost you consciously choose to pay. That book idea you keep postponing. That project you feel drawn to. That way you want to show up differently for others. Those aren't random thoughts, they're signals. They're your suffering pointing toward responsibility. Frankl believed that sometimes pain exists not to destroy you, but to shape you into someone capable of offering something the world needs. Your wounds can become tools. Your struggle can become guidance. Your endurance can become proof that survival is possible. And if right now you feel too broken to create, too tired to contribute, that doesn't mean this path is closed to you. It only means another path may be waiting, because meaning is not found in only one place. In the next chapter, we'll explore the second path Frankl identified, meaning through love, connection, and beauty, because sometimes what keeps you alive isn't what you give, but the simple, fragile knowledge that you matter to someone else. The cost of staying the same. There's a quiet price you pay for avoiding yourself. It doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in, small, almost polite, easy to ignore. It shows up as tiredness you can't sleep away, as irritation at things that never used to bother you, as a low, constant pressure in your chest that you mistake for stress or age or bad luck. But it's none of those. It's resistance. By now, you've probably noticed something uncomfortable. The pain you've been running from hasn't disappeared. It's just changed shape. You avoided becoming someone you feared, and in doing so, you became someone you don't recognize. Safer, maybe. More acceptable. Sure. But smaller. And here's the part most people never admit out loud. Staying the same hurts too. It just hurts in a quieter way. Change announces itself with chaos, with risk, with loss. Stagnation whispers. It dulls. It numbs. It convinces you that this, right here, is as good as it gets. You tell yourself stories to make it bearable. This is just how life is. I should be grateful. Other people have it worse. I'll deal with this later. Later becomes next year. Next year becomes a decade. And one day you wake up realizing you've spent years rehearsing a life you never stepped into. The tragedy isn't that you failed, it's that you never fully tried. You see it in moments of honesty, late at night, when the noise dies down and there's nothing left to distract you. A question rises, uninvited and persistent. Is this really me? That question scares people more than failure ever could, because failure hurts the ego. But that question threatens the identity you've been protecting. If you answer it truthfully, things have to change. So most people don't answer it. They drown it out with busyness, with scrolling, with work, with relationships that never go too deep, with dreams they keep vague on purpose, but the body keeps the score. It remembers every time you swallowed a truth, every time you chose comfort over alignment, every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't, and eventually it collects. That's when bitterness creeps in, not loud anger, quiet resentment, toward people who took risks, toward those who live freely, toward versions of yourself you secretly envy. You might call them reckless, immature, unrealistic. But underneath that judgment is grief. Grief for the self you didn't allow to exist. Here's the hard truth no one can soften for you. The person you're afraid to become isn't the danger. The real danger is dying while pretending you're alive. The fear you feel around change isn't a warning sign, it's a threshold. On one side is familiarity, predictable pain, manageable dissatisfaction. On the other is uncertainty, growth, loss, and the chance to feel real again. You don't need to blow up your life overnight. This isn't about impulsive destruction, it's about honesty, brutal, compassionate honesty. About admitting that the life you've built might be impressive, but misaligned. That the role you play might be functional, but false. That the version of you you've been avoiding might be the one capable of breathing fully. Avoiding that truth doesn't protect you. It slowly erodes you. And deep down, you already know this. That's why the discomfort won't leave. That's why this chapter feels personal. That's why something in you is shifting, even as you read. Because once you see the cost of staying the same, you can't unsee it. And the question is no longer, what if I change? It becomes, what will it cost me if I don't? That question doesn't demand an answer today, but it will keep asking, becoming what you've been avoiding. There comes a moment when resistance gets tired, not because you've conquered it, not because you've become fearless, but because carrying it has become heavier than letting it go. That moment doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet, ordinary, almost disappointing. There's no music swelling in the background, no sudden clarity, just a simple grounding realization. I can't keep living like this. This is where becoming begins, not with confidence, but with permission. Permission to stop pretending the old version still fits. Permission to disappoint people who only loved you when you were small. Permission to step into a self you once judged, feared, or misunderstood. The version of you you've been avoiding isn't a monster. It's not reckless or selfish or doomed. It's simply honest. Honest about what you want. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what no longer makes sense. And honesty is disruptive. It rearranges priorities. It redraws boundaries. It exposes relationships built on convenience instead of connection. That's why this step feels like loss, because in some ways it is. You will lose identities that kept you safe. You will lose approval that came with conditions. You may even lose people who benefited from your silence. But here's what you gain: integrity. When your inner world finally matches your outer life, something rare happens. The noise quiets. The constant tension eases. You stop performing and start inhabiting your own body again. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It becomes yours. Fear doesn't disappear. It changes roles. Instead of controlling you, it becomes a signal, a compass, proof that you're no longer sleepwalking. You start making choices from alignment, not avoidance. You say no without over-explaining. You say yes without needing permission. You stop negotiating with the parts of yourself that know better. And something unexpected happens. Energy returns. Not the frantic energy of chasing validation, but the steady strength of knowing where you stand. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally asking the right questions. The world may not applaud this version of you. In fact, it may resist it. People will call you changed. They'll say you're different. They might even miss the old you. Let them. The old you was exhausted. Becoming what you've been avoiding doesn't make you unrecognizable. It makes you legible to yourself. This is the self that doesn't need to be louder to be real, that doesn't need to be perfect to be worthy, that doesn't need to be fearless to move forward. It just needs to be present. And presence is powerful, because when you stop abandoning yourself, life stops feeling like something that's happening to you. You become a participant, a co-creator, someone who chooses instead of reacts. The buried self doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't expect you to get everything right. It only asks for one thing: commitment. Not to an outcome, not to a timeline, but to truth, to walking forward even when certainty isn't available, to choosing growth over familiarity, to trusting that the self you're becoming knows things the old one couldn't. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a different relationship with yourself, one built on respect instead of restraint, on curiosity instead of control, on courage that shows up quietly again and again. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to stop running from who you already are. And when you do, you'll realize the person you feared becoming was the one who could finally set you free.